Hey everybody, it's James at Project Pass here with another installment of Civil War Minutes. Try not to be consumed by the mustache, it is pretty powerful. And in this episode, we're going to touch on some of the innovations of the American Civil War. Innovations that I feel not only had an impact on the Civil War itself, but warfare to follow. And many people believe that the First World War was the first true modern war. And there are many valid arguments supporting that stance. But I tend to lean towards the American Civil War being the first true modern war. And I hope that some of these innovations are going to show you why I feel that way. Now to start, the American Civil War was the first major conflict in which railroads became a major factor. They were used beforehand, but not on the scale seen during the American Civil War. By 1861, 22,000 miles of track had been laid in the northern states and about 9,500 miles in the south. Now, although the South had fewer railways, they quickly realized the potential of railroads and used the rails it had to transport troops from one part of the battlefield to another in support of fellow troops in a threatened area. The best example of this? Well, the Battle of Bull Run, which was the first major engagement of the Civil War. A large Union army under the command of General McDowell moved south out of Washington, D.C. towards the rail center of Manassas. As the Union was beginning to gain the upper hand, Generals Joseph Johnston and Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson arrived from the Shenandoah Valley with Confederate reinforcements. These forces were transported to the battle by rail. The trip by rail was only about 30 miles, but for an army on foot, it would have taken 2 or 3 days. Here's a quick stat for you before we move on to the next innovation. Every major engagement east of the Mississippi River took place within 20 miles of a railroad. Now, if that doesn't show how important these became during this conflict, I don't know what does. Alright, so number 2, the telegraph. Now, nearly 150 years before texts, tweets, and emails, President Lincoln became the first wired president via the telegraph. After the war's outbreak, the newly created U.S. Military Telegraph Corps undertook the dangerous work of laying more than 15,000 miles of telegraph wire across battlefields that transmitted news almost instantaneously from the front lines to a telegraph office that had been established inside the old library of the War Department building adjacent to the White House. For the first time in the history of warfare, the telegraph helped field commanders to direct real-time battlefield operations and permitted senior military officials to coordinate strategy across large distances. The United States Military Telegraph Service handled some 6.5 million messages during the war. Think about something for a second. President Lincoln is in his war room in Washington, D.C., and he's able to get almost real-time updates from the battlefield. Remember, this is in the 1860s. If you think about it, this is probably one of the most impactful pieces of technology, not just during the Civil War, but warfare to follow for generations. Communication is key and will always remain one of the priorities in warfare. Alright, and the final innovation I want to share with you, and believe me, there are many more. If I didn't cover one that you feel is important, feel free to drop a comment below. One of my favorite things about doing this is learning new things from the history community, and YouTube is a great place to share ideas and learn new things. So drop a comment below, like this video, and hopefully share it if you found it informative. We touched on World War I in the beginning of the episode and how many people believe that's the first true modern war. Well, think about the German U-boats in World War I. They wreaked havoc on Allied shipping, and in many ways they did the same exact thing in World War II. Now, the first time a ship was sunk by a submarine, the American Civil War. The H.L. Hunley, often referred to as the Hunley, the CSS H.L. Hunley, or just the CSS Hunley, was a submarine of the Confederate States. The Hunley, nearly 40 feet long, was built in Mobile, Alabama. She was then shipped by rail, because as we know, railways were important, on August 12th of 1863 to Charleston. On February 17th, 1864, the Hunley attacked and sank a 1,240-ton United States Navy sloop of war called the USS Housatonic, which had been on Union blockade duty in Charleston's outer harbor. Now, soon after the Hunley sunk the USS Housatonic, the Hunley would disappear and would remain undiscovered up until 1995. Once located, the Hunley was raised in 2000 and is currently on display in North Charleston, South Carolina, at the Friends of the Hunley Museum. Now, for its crew, the Hunley proved pretty deadly. Prior to its successful mission, sinking the USS Housatonic, the Hunley sunk 2 more times on test missions, and many of those crew members did not make it. So in many ways, the Hunley was more deadly for its own crews than for enemy crews. But the USS Housatonic was sunk successfully by the Hunley, even though the Hunley would soon disappear after that. Again, we're in the 1860s, and a submarine fully submerged underwater, sank an enemy vessel. And that is a huge innovation for generations upon generations of warfare. So like I touched on, there are many more innovations from the American Civil War that I didn't touch on today. This is Civil War Minutes, and if I included any more innovations, it would turn into Civil War Hours. But stay tuned, because there will definitely be a part 2. And again, leave a like, leave a comment if you have a better innovation or an innovation that you feel is more impactful. And like I always say, we'll catch you on the next one.